Welcome to the FX Clipse experience, where I will be talking about our experience as users of FX Clipse over the last year, thereabouts. There's not going to be a whole lot of technical details, so hopefully it'll be at the very least entertaining, and I think that you should be able to learn something from it anyway. So, I will introduce myself. Everyone who's in a story wants to be the hero, so you kind of have to take that with a grain of salt. And not only I'm also not the only person who has been working with FX Clipse in our team. So there's other people, but I didn't want to take the time to draw complicated portraits of everyone on the team. So I'm the only one that's on there. So I work at a company called Bradex, which is a software development and consulting company in northern Germany. And my job title is developer, but among those things, I'm also occasionally do some storytelling. I have a bit of a weird sense of humor, as I imagine you'll see soon, and I am a terrible artist, as you're seeing already, and will continue to see throughout the talk. So, the reason that I've listed myself as the hero, because about a year ago, myself and my team received a quest from a customer. And that quest is to rewrite an application, a web-based application that I've shown here, anonymized with a hammer. Basically, all of the black areas are where labels are, and there's no real point in seeing a dynamic view of it because it's pretty static. I've dubbed this system the totally awesome, really cool system, but I'll just call it TARX. And the issue with TARX 1 being that it, as I stated, was fairly static and it was getting a little bit long in the tooth, and it wasn't very much fun to use. It never was very much fun to use, but people were starting to realize, hey, maybe it could be. So the requirements for TARX 2, among other things, was that it be a rich client instead of a web application, so we couldn't really reuse much of the code. And with regards to the UI, it had to be, the phrasing is pretty accurate there. Modern, but not too modern. A lot of the users are kind of a bit set in their ways, so they want something that's doesn't quite look like that, but they would maybe shy away from something that looks like a mobile app or something along those lines. And of course, they want it to be a joy to use. So we started picking out our tools that we wanted to take with us on this quest. In dealing with the rich client aspect, Eclipse E4 was pretty much a no-brainer for us. It was a real easy decision. I mean, you have your OSGI, the dependency injection in E4, and so on and so forth. And not only that, but the team also has a lot of experience. The team that we're working with has used E4 in projects in the past, and we have experience with it, and we know that we can use it for the forces of good. With regards to the cool UI and the modern joy-to-use UI, that, by the way, is a magic wand, in case you're curious. Before it was a sword, but I think that was maybe a little bit more obvious. So the comparison here, with JavaFX, you have a much easier time with that sort of modern look and aspect to it, mostly because of the animations and transitions, but also other stuff like CSS. Even though we're not in the web world, we still like to be able to use CSS to rapidly change, be able to rapidly change styles over the course of the whole application. And so on and so forth. The primary downside being we had at the time, I'll just say it in the present tense, I'm talking a year ago, no experience with JavaFX. We've seen some Java docs for it and so on and so forth, but we've never actually used it in any kind of real application. And the yellow point down at the bottom with the question mark being it doesn't work with E4. That would kind of negate our previous decision, right? And of course, otherwise I wouldn't be holding this talk. The answer to that is no. So we stumbled on FX Clipse, had a bit of a look at it. The direct quote from the website, JavaFX tooling and runtime for Eclipse and OSGI. Man, that sounds good. That's exactly what we're looking for. Primarily, we were interested in using it as an implementation of a JavaFX renderer on E4's rendering framework. So you can kind of think of that as E4 on the inside with a JavaFX coding. It's kind of like an M&M. It was at the time, and still certain aspects of it seem like magic to me. But it's important to keep in mind that you can build up experiences over time. And in the words of the science fiction writer Arthur C. Clarke, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. You can't tell the difference until you start to learn how it works. So this looked like the perfect fit for us. There was a bit of a question mark in our eyes because the version number at the time was 0.9. We did some math, and that's less than 1, which I don't know. That generally makes me nervous. So we certainly didn't want to dismiss it outright because that would be kind of ridiculous. We've used 0-point releases of stuff before, and it's sometimes worked out, often even, I would say. So we decided we'll do some prototyping for a week or two, see if we can do all the things that we want to do with a reasonable amount of effort, and make a decision after that. It's worth noting that the current version of FX Clipse is 2.1, so there's been a lot of movement since mid-2004, at least in the version numbers, and also in the functionality. So the first issue that we stumbled upon was rendering when we were doing our prototyping. Some of the workbench components didn't work exactly the way that we wanted them to, or they didn't look exactly the way we wanted them to. So we weren't sure quite what to do about that, how to configure it. And it turns out what we opted to do, our solution was to write custom renderers, which sounds, to me at least, or sounded really complicated. And it's really not. So that was something that was really worth learning. The basic steps, at least that we used, you write your custom whatever renderer, tool item or part stack that looks the way you want it to, acts the way you want it to. You then add that custom renderer to your custom renderer factory, and then you add your custom renderer factory to your plugin XML. That's where the registration happens. So I'm going to see if I can bring my Eclipse over there. I can sort of. Bear with me for just a second. Hey, there it is. So in this case, I can't remember whether this was a bug at the time or just missing functionality. But for tool items, for buttons in the toolbar, it was not possible to set the tooltip from the E4 application model editor. It wasn't reading it out, or maybe it was having problems with empty values, something along those lines. So what we ended up doing, we have our custom tool item renderer here, which when you want to get the widget class for a tool item, we want to return our custom class. And the custom class basically adds a null check. So that's a extremely simple example of a pretty simple operation, of a pretty simple way to customize things. So that was one of the initial issues that we had. We figured out how to solve that. All of the other issues were easy enough to solve. So we decided that that prototyping was a success. We would use it, and it's time to start working on the UI. We used GUI builders also in the past. We used to use for SWT stuff the GUI builder, window builder. And that worked quite well for us. The downside being no support for JavaFX unless you want to write it yourself, which we didn't want to do because we wanted to be able to get a quick start. Then we had a look at Scene Builder, which you can count as a negative or a positive, that it's from Oracle, depending on your point of view. Positive aspects, drag and drop, makes it easy enough to use. The initial impression was quite good. There was a bit of a problem with regards to OSGI. You end up with stuff that looks like this. Each of those big question marks is an image that Scene Builder cannot find because it's on a class path that Scene Builder is not aware of. You've also got several percent something where an internationalized string key is shown instead of its corresponding value. And so every time that we wanted to edit our UIs, it was just a mess of confusion. So that was the opposite of what a GUI builder should actually be helping you with. Then we found FX Graph, which is a part of FX Eclipse. It's a DSL for JavaFX UIs. It has a JSON-like syntax, and it compiles to FXML. I don't know if compile is actually the right word, but I'll use it here. But the huge difference, this UI here is the same as this one. It doesn't look like it, but it's the same thing. The styles, the images, and the internationalized strings all get found because FX Graph is aware of the OSGI class path. So that was a tremendous resource for us. it did end up causing some problems, namely, or being a part of some problems, let's say. FX Graph, at least in our use of it, it expects your images or icons to be in your source directory or in your source path. And the E4 application model wants them to be in the top level icons directory in the project. We were able to get it consistently working for one or the other, or both but not our build. So that was quite a bit of a problem because we wanted to be able to use our GUI builder and be able to build without having to tweak things in between. So another fellow on the project team, Benny, had an idea. He said, we could just create a sort of a symlink, because in Eclipse you can create a folder or a file that's a link to another folder or file. So, let's see here. In the lower right hand there, we have our icons. In our source directory, no problem for FX Graph, I mean. And we also have a link to our icons at the top level. So no problems for the E4 application model editor. That was a nice little trick. So the quest is nearly complete. We did our training, our prototyping. We implemented the application, which you could compare with gathering up the loot. And then we need to actually deploy the application or bring the loot back home. We actually took care of this build and deploy aspect a lot earlier in our process because it was a part of our automated build and automated tests. So chronologically, this is a little bit inaccurate, but it fits from the perspective there. The problem that we had with building and deploying, basically building, was network instability, primarily during our nightly builds. It would happen not frequently, but with enough frequency to be incredibly annoying, that the build would fail because unable to contact P2 update site, this one or the other one, whether it was their fault or our fault or anything in between. It sort of made gathering up the bits of our target platform a real roll of the dice, which we solved using the mirroring functionality of Tycho, Maven and Tycho. It's also supported in Ant and on the command line, but we build with Maven and Tycho, so that's what we're familiar with. So the benefit of that, other than the stability in terms of network connectivity, we don't have to worry about that. We also have a sort of set it and forget it kind of aspect where we mirror our target platform and we don't have to deal with it again until we want to upgrade. There are no possible automatic upgrades that sort of happen implicitly without our knowing about it. So there's two advantages of using a mirror for your target platform. So we go through the mirror and we're home free. I can show an example POM, but it's probably not super interesting. It's based on the example POM on the Tycho website. and very little was changed. So I can show that later if people are interested. I'm kind of doubtful. So I wanted to show a little bit of the UI that we came up with. It's also been anonymized with a hammer, unfortunately. But I can at least show some of the benefits that we got from being able to use JavaFX. And let's see. Well, things seem to be a little bit off center, but that's not too big of a deal. One of the nice aspects of JavaFX is a full screen mode, which on top of making this part of the UI full screen, it's not in this particular case, but we also do some relayouting, and it's sort of a presentation mode, which the presentation mode aspect of it can also be enhanced by some animations. So if you've got sort of a slideshow, which this should be very similar to, and you go to the next one, then you know how you got there. And you can proceed through them and go back. A small thing, but it really falls into the category of modern, but not too modern. Another aspect that gave us some more room for these areas here are images that you can upload or download or delete. Moving the buttons into a hovering toolbar gave us some more space for the images. Again, tiny little things, but can make a big difference. So, those were the aspects that I wanted to show. And on that note, I want to kind of, just in order to distill it down to one slide, I feel like we've leveled up a lot over the past year. I hope you guys were able to level up a little bit during this talk. Just in general, we've been real happy with FX Clipse. And I would definitely recommend, if it looks like it's something that might work for your project, don't be discouraged by small obstacles. Really take the time to prototype it for a week or two and work out the kinks and see whether it really will work for you. So, if you liked the talk, I'll take questions in a second. Just if you liked the talk, feel free to give a +1 on the evaluation side. If you didn't like it, you can give a -1 certainly, or if it was blah, a 0, obviously. Any way that you evaluate it, I would really appreciate comments. So that's at least as important to me as the point value there. So I can take questions if there are any questions. There are no questions. Okay, then thanks for your time. Have a good rest of your conference.